You said you saw a wasted masterpiece. Anya's voice rang out, cold and sharp as a scalpel. But did it ever occur to you that by giving me a world of lies, you weren't saving a masterpiece, but creating a monster? That question wasn't just an accusation. It was a sword thrust directly at the self-satisfaction of the man standing before her. But to understand its weight, to see the scar it left behind, one has to turn back a page of the past, to the place where that masterpiece was still submerged in despair and the smell of grease, in a small diner in Manhattan. The acrid scent of burnt coffee and overcooked bacon that was Anya Vance's permanent perfume, a fragrance that clung not only to her faded, cheap polyester uniform, but also seeped into every pore, becoming part of the second skin she was forced to wear. Each morning, as she tied the fraying apron around her waist, Anya felt as if she were putting on another layer of herself, one that concealed the person she used to be. Her two 6-year-old eyes, which once gazed with awe at the works of Delacroix in the Louvre, now only reflected the grease on the tabletops and her own perpetual exhaustion. Astor Diner, her place of work, was a theater of broken dreams. Aspiring actors read scripts between shifts. Struggling writers scribbled the opening lines of their great American novels on napkins. And Anya, a forgotten scholar, calculated whether today's tips would be enough to pay the electricity bill. She was the perfect waitress, efficient, polite, and nearly invisible. A ghost who glided between tables, fulfilling every request with a practiced, soulless smile. More coffee, doll, a gruff voice called from table 7. It was Henderson, a middle-aged stockbroker, trying to impress his young girlfriend by tormenting the waitstaff. He had already sent back his orange juice for having too much pulp and complained that his scrambled eggs lacked fluffiness. Anya simply smiled and replied, "Yes, sir," while in her mind she analyzed the contrast between Henderson's crude realism and the young woman's airy romanticism. As Anya moved through the crowded room, her gaze subconsciously drifted to a figure in the corner. He was different. In a sea of people glued to their phones or shouting to be heard over one another, he was quietly observing. A simple grey cashmere sweater, no flashy watch or jewelry, yet the perfect cut and his straight, calm posture exuded a quiet power. He sipped his black coffee, and each time Anya passed, she felt his gaze on her back. It wasn't a leering or covetous look, but a cold, deep analysis. Like an entomologist studying an interesting specimen, Anya mentally pegged him as either a writer searching for a character or a university professor. Just then, the bell above the door jingled, interrupting Anya's thoughts. A lost-looking elderly woman entered, a European tourist who had taken a wrong turn off Madison Avenue. She approached the counter where Kevin, the new busboy, was struggling with the seating chart. "A table, s'il vous plaît?" she asked, her voice trembling, her English thick with a French accent. Kevin looked up with a blank expression. "A table what, ma'am?" "Pour une personne, s'il vous plaît," she repeated, confusion now etched on her face. "Listen, ma'am, I don't speak Spanish," Kevin shrugged, turning back to his work. The old woman grew more desperate, trying again in her native tongue. From table 7, Henderson sighed dramatically. "Oh, for goodness sake, let a man of culture handle this." He pushed back his chair, puffed out his chest, and approached, turning the elegant nasal sounds of French into a series of garbled squawks. Anya felt a flush of vicarious embarrassment. It wasn't just that he was butchering a beautiful language. It was the arrogance, the self-satisfaction of making someone else's distress his own stage. Something inside her, the part of her that remembered afternoons strolling along the Seine, the part of her that had been buried beneath the apron and the fake smiles, finally broke. She set down her basket of bread, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked over. Her eyes unintentionally met the gaze of the man in the corner. He, Julian Thorne, leaned forward slightly, his coffee cup suspended in mid-air, his deep blue eyes focused entirely on her. Anya smiled gently at the old woman and spoke. Her voice was no longer the flat, weary tone of a New York waitress. It was clear and fluid, with a perfect Parisian lilt she hadn't used in 4 years. "Madame, pardonnez-moi pour l'interruption," she began. "I apologize for the interruption. This man doesn't understand you. May I help? You look like you might be lost." The entire diner seemed to fall silent. Henderson's jaw was agape, his face red with humiliation. The Frenchwoman looked as though she had found a lifeline. Her face lit up with relief. Anya listened patiently, nodding, reassuring her in warm, colloquial French. "Ne vous inquiétez pas, madame. Tout ira bien," she said. Then she turned to Kevin. "Kevin, find her a table, table 12. Bring her a glass of water and a menu." She turned back to the old woman. "Please, have a seat. I'll use my phone to call your tour guide." A few minutes later, everything was sorted. The old woman was immensely grateful, trying to press a crumpled $20 bill into her hand, but Anya gently refused. "C'est mon plaisir, madame. Bon voyage." As the old woman departed, a quiet sense of satisfaction settled over Anya. She felt like herself again. She returned to clear Henderson's table. He was gone, leaving a single $1 bill on a $100 check. No surprise there. The surprise was the man in the corner also getting up to leave. As he passed, he caught her eye. He gave a subtle nod, almost imperceptible, but in his eyes was a deep, chilling recognition. He left a crisp $100 bill for his $3 coffee and exited without a word. Anya pocketed the money, a small, triumphant thrill running through her. She thought it was just a fleeting moment of rebellion. She had no idea it was only the beginning. When her shift ended at 5 p.m., Saul, the grizzled cook, called out to her, "Hey Vance, that quiet guy in the corner, he came back a few minutes ago, said he forgot to give you this." He handed her a sleek, pitch-black envelope made of expensive paper. It was sealed with a silver wax stamp of a stylized falcon. Leaning against the cold brick wall of the alley, under the dim security light, Anya's hands trembled as she broke the seal. Inside were 2 things. The first was a thick, black business card, also embossed with the silver falcon. Below the emblem was a name and a title, Julian Thorne, CEO, Thorne Global. Anya's breath caught in her throat. Thorne Global wasn't just a tech company. It was a global behemoth in aerospace, logistics, and AI. Julian Thorne was a legend, a reclusive genius who rarely appeared in public. He was the quiet man in the diner. The second item made her heart stop. It was a plane ticket, or rather, a reservation on a private jet, scheduled to depart from Teterboro Airport to Paris at noon the next day. The passenger name, Anya Vance. Tucked into the ticket was a handwritten note in silver ink. The handwriting was sharp and decisive. "Miss Vance, talent should never be wasted on mediocrity. A voice like yours belongs in Paris, not a diner. A car will be waiting for you at your address at 10 a.m. tomorrow. This is not a request. This is an opportunity. J.T." Anya read the message again and again, her mind reeling. This had to be a joke, a cruel prank. But how did he know her address? And what would a prank like this cost? She went home in a daze. "Good heavens, you look like you've seen a ghost," said Cleo, her pragmatic roommate. Anya silently laid everything on the coffee table. Cleo picked up the business card. "Thorne Global, isn't that?" Her eyes widened. She read the note, then looked at the ticket. She stared up at Anya, her jaw dropped. "Anya, what on earth is this?" "I don't know," Anya whispered, sinking onto the sofa. "It's him, the man from the diner I told you about." Cleo's initial astonishment quickly turned into deep suspicion. She was a paralegal, grounded in reality and protective of her friend. "Hold on, Anya. A strange billionaire offering you a private jet ticket to Paris. This is every red flag in the book. This is how horror movies start. Human trafficking, a weird cult, whatever. You can't be serious." "I know it's crazy," Anya said, running a hand through her hair. "But the note, talent should not be wasted." "And how did he get your address?" Cleo countered. That's not observation, that's investigation. That's a stalker level of knowledge. Anya, this is serious. You can't go. The fear was real. Cleo's warning was logical, but the pull of Paris, of an escape from a life that was slowly suffocating her, was stronger. Anya looked around their cramped apartment, at the overdue bills on the counter, at her grease-stained uniform. This was her reality, safe, predictable, and slowly killing her. The note wasn't just an offer, it was a challenge to be more than what she had become. She looked at Cleo, her best friend, her anchor in this difficult life. I think I have to go, Anya said, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. I have to know. The flight on the Gulfstream G650 was a surreal experience. Everything was upholstered in cream leather and dark ebony, a sterile, silent luxury. Anya Vance was the sole passenger, suspended between two worlds, a tired old life left behind and a completely unknown future ahead. At Le Bourget Airport in Paris, there was no chaos. A man in a sleek black suit was waiting at the foot of the aircraft stairs. "Miss Vance, this way, please," he said, not needing to ask her name. The black Bentley glided through the familiar streets. Through the soundproofed windows, Anya felt like a stranger in the very city she had once called her second home. The car stopped before a magnificent estate. The grand wrought-iron gates automatically swung open, leading to a private limestone mansion. The massive oak door opened before she could even touch it. Julian Thorne was waiting in the marbled grand hall. He was dressed in a charcoal turtleneck and trousers, simple yet radiating power. Up close, Anya saw the sharp lines of his face and a subtle weariness around his deep blue eyes. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice low and calm. "Welcome to Paris. I trust your flight was comfortable." "Yes, thank you," she stammered, feeling small and out of place. "Mr. Thorne, I don't understand. Why am I here?" "Clarity is the purpose of this visit," he said, a faint smile on his lips. "But first, you must be tired. My housekeeper will show you to your room. We will talk in the morning." Anya's room was larger than the entire apartment she shared with Cleo, but it felt more like a beautiful golden cage than a sanctuary. She lay awake all night, her mind racing with 1,000 questions. The next morning, she put on her only decent black dress and went down to the library. Julian was seated behind a massive wooden desk. He gestured for her to sit in a leather armchair across from him. "You're a direct person, Miss Vance, and I appreciate that," he began. "So I will be direct as well. You are not here for a conventional job. I need you not because you know French. I need you because of how you use it with empathy, with subtlety, and a hidden sharpness." Thorne Global is in the final stages of acquiring a company, a French one, Maison Rousseau. Anya knew the name, a legendary fashion house, an icon of old-world French luxury. The problem is, the current heiress, Eleonora Rousseau, is a pure traditionalist. She has rejected every one of our negotiation teams. They talk about profits, about market share. They don't speak her language, and I don't mean French. Just then, the library door opened. A woman entered, her heels clicking with a decisive rhythm. She was tall, impossibly chic, and exuded an aura of cold authority. "Julian, you're late for the meeting," she said, her voice like a razor. "Is this her, the waitress?" "Anya Vance, this is my sister, Serafina Thorne," Julian said, his voice calm. "Serafina is our COO, but her true expertise is in security and strategy." Serafina extended a long, perfectly manicured hand, but her handshake was cold and perfunctory. "A pleasure, though I confess I don't understand the purpose of this experiment." "Julian," she turned back to Anya, her eyes unapologetically analytical. Julian ignored his sister. "Your mission isn't to negotiate," he continued. "Your mission is far more complex. We believe Madame Rousseau is hoarding something, a lost family legacy, the original formula for a legendary perfume, L'Âme Perdue, the lost soul. It is priceless, both financially and culturally. He paused, his eyes locked on hers. Your job, Miss Vance, is to become someone she will trust enough to reveal that secret. You won't be selling her a deal. You'll be selling her a story, a connection. You will be a cultural spy. Anya's world tilted. This wasn't a job. This was an intelligence operation, an infiltration. She was just a waitress. Why? Why me? She asked, her voice trembling. Because in that diner, Julian said, I saw you do two things. First, you handled a boorish man with professional calm. Second, you treated a frightened woman with genuine compassion. You can transition between two worlds. That is a rare skill, and it's precisely what I need. And if I fail? Anya asked, meeting his gaze. Serafina answered, a cold smile on her lips. If you fail, a car will return you to the airport, and you can go back to clearing tables. We'll compensate you for your time, of course. Her tone made it clear that failure was the only outcome she expected. The following days were a brutal transformation. Serafina became Anya's trainer, a severe taskmaster. Anya's room was filled with books on French art, history, and the Rousseau family's genealogy. Each morning, Serafina would quiz her. Who was Madame Rousseau's favorite painter? She would ask abruptly. What kind of tea does she drink in the afternoon? Anya answered without hesitation, but the training went beyond knowledge. Serafina taught Anya how to walk, how to hold a champagne flute, how to spot an authentic designer from a counterfeit. Emotion is a liability, Serafina said, knocking Anya onto the mat for the 5th time. She is a target, not your friend. The empathy my brother so admires in you is your greatest weakness. Control it, or it will destroy you. Finally, Anya was given a new identity, a French-American art researcher. Her cover was set. The first encounter was arranged at a small, private art exhibition. Anya's heart pounded. She spotted Eleonora Rousseau from a distance, a small woman with sharp eyes and a mane of silver hair. As planned, Anya positioned herself in front of a landscape painting she knew Eleonora was particularly fond of. She pretended to be completely lost in the piece. It's incredible how he captured the light of the late afternoon, she murmured in French. It's almost audible, the whisper of the wind through the fields. Most people overlook this one. A low, aged voice said next to her. It was Eleonora. Anya turned, feigning surprise. It's just that. Most people look for the big names, not for the true art. This painting has a soul. It doesn't shout, it whispers. Eleonora studied her for a long moment, her sharp eyes seeming to pierce through the facade. A spark of interest flickered in those guarded eyes. You have a fine eye, Mademoiselle. Vance, Anya Vance. It's an honor, Madame Rousseau. Miss Vance, Eleonora said, a faint smile on her lips. Perhaps you should come by my private residence one day. I have a few pieces that might whisper to you. It was the first breakthrough, an invitation. Anya had breached the target's initial defenses. As she left the gallery, a cold sense of guilt began to creep into her heart. She wasn't just deceiving a woman. She was using her own love, her love for art, for French culture as a weapon. Julian had weaponized beauty, and Anya realized she was beginning to genuinely admire the woman she was tasked with deceiving. Over the next few weeks, Anya stepped into a world she had only read about in books. The Rousseau mansion wasn't just a house, it was a private museum. Her art discussions with Eleonora gradually became intimate conversations, ranging from Fragonard's painting techniques to the loneliness of powerful women. Anya realized that Eleonora was a woman imprisoned by her own legacy, surrounded by sycophants, but without a true confidant. Anya filled that void, and that was what hurt her most. Every genuine compliment, every shared story was part of a meticulously calculated performance. You have an old soul, Anya, Eleonora said, her hand resting lightly on Anya's. It is so rare in this modern world. The words felt like a twist of a knife in Anya's conscience. That evening, she reported back to Julian over a secure line. Her voice was cold and professional, a defense mechanism to hide her internal turmoil. "She is beginning to trust me," she said. "But she is extremely cautious. She hasn't mentioned anything about perfume or the formula." "Patience, Miss Vance." Julian's voice was calm and distant. "Trust is like building a cathedral. It takes time." One night, after dinner at the Russos', Anya returned to her apartment overlooking the Seine. She walked in, a cold sense of unease creeping up her spine. Nothing was broken, but something was off. A book on a shelf was a few millimeters out of alignment. A cushion on the sofa was slightly askew. The air in the room felt different, as if her privacy had been violated. She immediately called Serafina. She didn't say anything, just described the tiny details she had noticed. "Don't touch anything," Serafina finally said, her voice for the first time lacking its usual smugness, replaced by a strained, serious tone. "Leave the apartment immediately. Go to safe house number 3. I'll be there in 10 minutes." At a small, deserted cafe in Saint-Germain-des-Prés, Serafina appeared like a ghost. "That's his signature," Serafina said, her voice low and urgent. "Silas Varga, the Rook. He's a black market broker for information and artifacts. He never leaves a trace, except for subtle, intentional details to let his target know he was there. He's toying with you. This means he knows who you are, and he knows what you're after." Anya's world collapsed. The mission was no longer a sophisticated game of wits. It had suddenly become life-threatening. "Why didn't Julian tell me about this?" Anya asked. "Because he didn't think the Rook would move so quickly," Serafina replied. "My brother is sometimes overly confident in his plans. But now the chessboard has changed. You are no longer just a collector of information. You are a target." The pressure and danger made Anya more focused. She knew she could no longer play this game half-heartedly. During a private afternoon tea, Anya skillfully steered the conversation toward the Russo family's history. Eleonora opened up, telling her about her great-grandmother. "She was a rebel," Eleonora said. "She said that women were bound by too many things: gowns, rules, secrets. She had a collection of exquisite antique paper fans. She said each fan, when opened, released a story, a small secret." A light bulb went off in Anya's head. A released secret. She deduced that the formula could be encoded in those fans. Julian's intelligence confirmed the fan collection would be the centerpiece of a charity auction, Bal des Papillons, that weekend. It was their chance. But it also meant the Rook would be there as well. The auction took place at the Petit Palais. The air was filled with the glitter of chandeliers and expensive jewelry. Anya walked beside Eleonora, smiling and nodding, her heart pounding with anxiety. Serafina, posing as a businesswoman, was also present, her eyes constantly scanning the room. As the host introduced the fan collection, the lights in the main hall suddenly went out. A chorus of panicked screams erupted, followed by the jarring sound of breaking glass. In the chaos, Anya acted on instinct. Serafina's training kicked in. "Down!" she yelled, pulling Eleonora behind an overturned catering table. Two dark figures, moving nimbly in the darkness, dashed toward the glass case. Anya grabbed a heavy champagne bottle. One of the dark figures had already retrieved a fan box and turned back. He charged toward them, perhaps intending to take them hostage. Anya didn't hesitate. She swung the bottle hard, hitting him in the temple. He crumpled to the floor, unconscious. The second figure, larger, pointed a gun at her. The faint emergency light illuminated his face, revealing a cold smile. "Clever girl," a low, cold voice with an Eastern European accent said. "But the game is over." Before he could pull the trigger, another gunshot rang out from the doorway. Security forces had arrived. The Rook threw a smoke grenade onto the floor, and in the swirling smoke, he and his accomplice vanished, taking part of the collection with them. After the incident, Eleonora was shaken but unharmed. She gripped Anya's hand tightly. "You saved me," she whispered. Her trust was now absolute. That night, Anya confronted Julian in his library. The shock and adrenaline had worn off, leaving a cold fury. "You knew he would be there. You knew there would be a risk," she said, her voice filled with steel. "You used me and an innocent woman as bait." "It was a calculated risk," Julian replied, his face devoid of emotion. "We needed him to act to confirm the hypothesis about the fans." "There's nothing calculated about a bullet," she retorted. "I am no longer the grateful waitress you picked up from New York, Mr. Thorne. From now on, I want to know everything, no secrets. Otherwise, our deal is off." He looked at her, a glint of surprise and, perhaps, respect in his deep blue eyes. He hadn't just recruited a talent, he had forged a weapon, and that weapon was now pointed directly at him. Anya was no longer a passive pawn. She had become a player, one with demands of her own. In Julian's library, the silence was as thick as the air before a storm. Anya stood straight, her hands clenched into fists. She had crossed a line, and she knew there was no turning back. Julian watched her for a long moment, his analytical gaze measuring the change. Finally, he sighed and went to a small bar, pouring 2 glasses of cognac. He offered one to her. "All right," he said. "You've proven yourself not just an asset, but a partner. You deserve to know the truth." He gestured for her to sit down. "This story didn't start with Thorne Global wanting to acquire Maison Rousseau," he began. "It started nearly 2 centuries ago, with 2 families, the Thornes and the Roussiers." Anya listened without a word. "My ancestor, Alistair Thorne, was an alchemist and a parfumeur. L'Âme Perdue was his masterpiece. The Roussiers, wealthy silk merchants at the time, were his patrons. They saw the commercial potential of the formula." Julian paused, taking a sip of his drink. "According to my family's records, Alistair refused to sell the formula. One night, his laboratory burned to the ground. Alistair died in the fire. The formula vanished. A few years later, Maison Rousseau launched its first fragrance, a simplified version of L'Âme Perdue. My family has always believed they stole it." He looked up at Anya. "This isn't just about restoring my family's honor. That formula, in the wrong hands like the Rooks, could be weaponized. It's not just perfume, it is a form of power." Julian's story complicated everything. The mission was no longer a cold business deal or a personal vendetta. It carried a moral weight Anya had not anticipated. Anya's relationship with Eleonora deepened. After the attack, Eleonora regarded Anya as a protector, a confidante. She had no idea that this closeness was a form of torture for Anya. A few days later, Eleonora said to Anya, her voice hushed and conspiratorial, "I have something I want to show you. A place no one else knows about, not even my family." She led Anya through the Maison Rousseau flagship store, through a staff door, and stopped in front of an intricately embroidered wall. She pressed a hidden pattern, and a section of the wall silently slid aside, revealing a spiral stone staircase. They stepped into a circular library, its walls lined with dark oak and filled with ancient leather-bound books. "The fans were a diversion," Eleonora said. "A test of greed. I let the Rook take a few of them. They contained nothing. I wanted to see how far he would go." She went to a shelf, retrieving a seemingly ordinary book, a volume of Baudelaire's poetry. "The real secret, my dear, is always hidden in plain sight." She turned to a blank page, then switched on a lamp with a strange, violet bulb. Under the ultraviolet light, handwritten words in an invisible ink slowly began to emerge. It was it. L'Âme Perdue. Anya stood there, her heart pounding. The mission was right in front of her. Just one photograph, and it would be over. But when she looked at Eleonora's face, radiant with trust, she couldn't do it. Her conscience was screaming. "Madame Eleonora, I have to tell you something," she began, her voice trembling, determined to confess everything. "How touching," a sarcastic voice said from the shadows of the entrance. A truly lovely moment. Silas the Rook Varga stepped out of the darkness, a silenced pistol in his hand. He was followed by Antoine, Eleonora's nephew, his face pale with fear and guilt. "Hand it over, Miss Vance," the rook said, ignoring Eleonora. "Photograph the formula, send it to me, or your old friend here will meet an unpleasant end." He grabbed Eleonora, pressing the gun to her temple. Anya's heart stopped. Julian's entire plan, Serafina's training, it all went to hell. She was trapped. If she gave him the formula, a potential weapon would fall into the wrong hands. If she didn't, Eleonora would die. But then, amid the panic, a cold calm descended upon her. She took a deep breath. "All right," she said, her voice eerily steady. "You win, but I need a few things from that table over there to make sure the ink's pH isn't affected by the flash." The rook nodded, gesturing. "Hurry." Anya went to the table, her hands trembling with a deliberate feigned motion to mask her true intention. She didn't grab the things needed to preserve the ink. She grabbed the things needed to create chaos. She swiftly poured a few different liquids into a small glass vial. She turned back, holding the vial in her hand. She looked the rook straight in the eye, a cold, challenging smile on her face. "Did Mr. Thorne ever tell you what I studied in Paris, Mr. Varga?" she asked. "I didn't just study art. I studied how beautiful things can burn." Before he could react, she hurled the vial hard onto the stone floor at his feet. The glass vial shattered on the stone floor with a sharp crack. Immediately, the chemical mixture reacted. A flash of blue light followed by a thick, acrid cloud of white smoke. It wasn't a major explosion, but in the confined space of the library, it was enough to cause absolute chaos. The rook coughed violently, his vision obscured. The nephew, Antoine, screamed and fell to the floor, completely disoriented. That was the moment Anya had been waiting for. "Run!" she yelled, grabbing Eleonora's arm and pulling her toward a narrow passage. Anya had also managed to activate the emergency beacon that Serafina had given her, disguised as a brooch. The rook quickly regained his composure, pressing the cold barrel of the gun to her temple. "Now you both die." Just then, the library's main door burst open. Julian and Serafina stormed in like a whirlwind. Anya knew they couldn't shoot while the rook held her hostage. She had to create her own opportunity. She remembered one of Serafina's first lessons. Always use your environment as a weapon. She glanced at the massive bookshelf next to her. "Mr. Thorne," she yelled, unexpectedly, "the formula isn't in that book. It's in the one on the top shelf." It was a lie, a desperate distraction, but it worked. For a split second, the rook reflexively looked up. That was all Anya needed. With all her might, she thrust her elbow backward into his ribs and stomped her pointed heel onto the top of his foot. He grunted in pain, his grip on her loosening slightly. Anya immediately ducked, twisting out of his hold, and with her shoulder shoved hard against the base of the bookshelf. The massive, ancient bookshelf wobbled, then crashed down, burying the rook. He wasn't dead, but he was neutralized. In the ensuing silence, all that remained was the sound of heavy breathing. Serafina quickly subdued the rook and the treacherous nephew. Julian rushed to Anya's side. "Are you all right?" he asked, genuine concern in his eyes. Anya nodded, but her gaze was fixed on Eleonora. The older woman stood there, watching her, her face a complex canvas of shock, hurt, and something else. Once it was safe, Anya stepped in front of her. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, tears beginning to fall. Everything I told you was part of a plan. My name is Anya Vance. I was hired by Mr. Thorne to earn your trust and find this formula." She told her everything, no excuses, just the raw, unadorned truth. Eleonora listened in silence. When Anya finished, she reached out, gently wiping a tear from her cheek. "Yes, you deceived me," she said, her voice hoarse. "But I also saw who you were in the moment of greatest danger. You had every opportunity to take the formula and run, but you chose to protect me." She looked over at Julian. "And you used a young woman as a weapon in your family's feud." Julian bowed his head, a silent admission. "The formula. Anya said, turning to look at them both. She took a deep breath, feeling a new sense of authority. I'm not giving it to you, Mr. Thorne, because it doesn't entirely belong to your family, nor am I giving it back to you, Madame Rousseau, because this legacy is too great to be locked away in a secret library. She looked Julian and Eleonora directly in the eyes. Your families have been fighting over this legacy for centuries. The greed, the revenge, it nearly got us all killed today. It's time to stop. I propose a different solution, she continued, her voice firm and strong. A collaboration. Thorne Global has the technology, the distribution network. Maison Rousseau has the heritage. Together, let's recreate L'Âme Perdue. Let's share the true story, both the glory and the shame. And I, she said, will be the one to run that venture, not as an employee, but as a partner. It was a bold move, an unexpected challenge. Julian and Eleonora looked at each other. Finally, it was Eleonora who broke the silence. She looked at Anya, and a warm smile, for the first time, spread across her face. I think that's an excellent idea, she said. Julian looked at Anya, the astonishment in his eyes slowly turning into undisguised admiration. He laughed, a soft, genuine laugh. I told you, he said, I didn't create a monster. I unleashed a queen. He extended his hand. Welcome aboard, partner. A year later, at the Grand Palais in Paris, hundreds of the world's most powerful people were gathered. A subtle, complex scent filled the air. Anya Vance walked out, no longer in a waitress uniform or a borrowed gown. She wore a perfectly tailored white suit that exuded confidence and authority. She was the CEO of the joint venture, the woman who had brought a crazy idea from a smoky library into reality. Tonight, she began her speech, her voice echoing through the hall. We are not just launching a perfume, we are launching a story of creation, of loss, and ultimately, of reconciliation. L'Âme Perdue is no longer a lost soul. It has found its way home. In the crowd, Julian Thorne and Eleonora Rousseau stood side by side, not as rivals, but as co-founders. Anya ended her speech to thunderous applause. Her eyes found Julian's. He gave her a slight nod, an acknowledgement, a deep respect. Anya smiled. She was no longer a French-speaking waitress, nor was she a spy in a dangerous game. She was a woman who had been ground down by life, given a chance, and used it to rebuild not only herself but history. She wasn't a wasted masterpiece that had been saved. She was a masterpiece who had fought to be reborn. And this time, she would paint the rest of the picture herself, in the most brilliant colors.